All right, guys. Yo, welcome back to the Sobriety University podcast. Really excited for this episode today. Thank you for waiting. If you've been waiting in the waiting room, we were kind of chatting back behind the scenes here and getting to know each other a bit. So, Chris is someone I've recently met, and why I'm really excited for this show in particular is because you have a crazy story, man. And you have the best part of it is not only do you have a crazy story, you have a crazy comeback, and that is what this channel is all about. Is kind of showing people that there is a light at the end of the tunnel and you can live a fantastic life without drugs, alcohol, or whatever substance it is. And I think that fear that, life's just going to be boring and dismal holds a lot of people back from taking that 1 to 2 year time frame to really, get serious and get rid of the substance for good. So, Chris, thank you for coming on, and feel free to introduce yourself and tell people, what you do, where you're from, all that good stuff.
Well, Joel, thanks first off for having me on here.
You're welcome.
I'm pumped. I'm a little jealous that I'm not in Mexico, but I am still excited. And one of those things that you said, I could totally relate to because when I first started getting introduced to recovery and getting sent to those local community groups that we were talking about earlier, the support groups, I would go in my hometown of Emmaus, Pennsylvania, which is just
Mhm.
a little tiny town south of Allentown, which is just a mini Philadelphia, if you will.
Okay.
And I would go to these groups, because the judge sent me there, or like my parents
Mhm.
were upset, or, somebody at school, or whatever it might have been that led me to my first community support group meetings. And I would get there and it would just be a bunch of angry, crusty old dudes. And they'd be like,
Mhm.
man, my lawnmower done broke yesterday. Stuff ain't going good, but I got 39 years sober, so everything's going to be just fine. And you know what? 17-year-old kid is out there shooting heroin. Keep coming back. And like, there was just no message. There was nothing compelling. There was nothing to hold me. There was nothing to say, kid, life's good. It was like, kid, your lawnmower's going to break one day. So, yeah. So
Dang.
I appreciate you opening with that. And for anybody who's listening that has experienced those same things, I promise you, life gets big, life gets beautiful.
Mhm.
You don't have to necessarily keep coming back to misery after misery. You can keep coming back for excitement, keep coming back for freedom. And those are the things that I love to talk about. So
Oh,
I didn't even introduce
beautiful, man.
myself, but
Yeah.
hell yeah, Joel.
Yeah, Chris. Dude. Oh my God. That's so, yeah. After hearing that story, I'm like, yeah, I'd rather use heroin actually than worry about my lawnmower. So let's dive into that a bit. My channel, we focus mostly on marijuana. That seems to be what a lot of people come for, and alcohol as well. So heroin's more one of those little niche topics. And when I hear somebody has gone through heroin, I never did heroin. So to me, that's still like in my mind, like that's a big deal. Like that's a big time drug. So walk us through like your kind of upbringing and what led you to start shooting up.
Well, it's cool you said that because I have a vast experience with alcohol and marijuana. And they were
Okay.
they were my first two successive substances of use in my youth.
Okay.
And so I like to start out and talk about how I had a theoretically good childhood in like a good suburban area, and my parents are still together to this day. I had,
Wow.
a bunch of little brothers running around. We had dogs. We had a house. I went to a good school, and theoretically, from the outside looking in, I had everything I needed. Like, it was
Mhm.
like, Chris, you're questionably intelligent. You're in a good school district.
Yeah.
You could go on and do whatever it is you want. But for the second I can remember anything, I always remember this awkward, awful feeling inside. And I could
Mhm.
never on my best day put to words what that was. I was a kid. I just assumed everybody felt that way. There was no real indicator to me that I was abnormal.
Mhm.
I just felt off. And some of the symptoms I talk about, I literally talk about these everywhere. But some of the symptoms I experienced were for some reason I could never really sleep at night. My mind would always race a billion miles a second. I'm literally like 8 years old stressing about how I'm going to pay my homeowner's insurance one day. And it was just, there's no logic to it, but my brain is just constantly running. And
Okay. Yeah.
worse than that, I have to go to school. School sucks. It's
Yeah.
the morning.
I'm with
I'm
you there.
thrown into these awkward social situations. and I do terrible in social situations because I am
Mhm.
always concerned with what everybody else is doing. Can you still hear
Mhm.
me here?
Oh yeah. Yep.
All right, I'm getting a call through, so I'm
Okay.
doing this.
Good.
I just
Nice.
wanted to make sure it didn't knock me off.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, so I'm going to school as a kid, just like all of us do. We have to. And, I'm in the social setting. One of the main problems that I have as a kid is this lack of connection that I feel inside. Like, I don't ever feel like I connect with anybody. So if I was in a room with a bunch of people I didn't know, I kind of felt off. I didn't feel like I
Mhm.
really fit there, or there was just something missing.
Yeah.
Worse than that, if I was in a room with, people I did know, I still felt that same weird, internal feeling. And
Yeah.
worse than that, if I was in a room with my family, I still felt that same way. Like people who love me more than anything in the world, like I still don't feel connected to you. And
Mm.
it was, I could never figure it out. Couldn't tell you that that was happening. I think it showed up in a lot of different ways where like I was bored all the time, where I didn't
Mm.
know what to do with myself, or, even when I was doing something exciting, I still kind of felt off or like something was missing. And, thankfully, through recovery, figured out that it didn't have to be like that entire time. It just was.
Mm.
And,
Just
I
was.
tried my best to push through until I was
Mhm.
13.
Okay.
And one day, when I was 13 years old, I was already a giant, awkward, 13-year-old kid with like a small beard. I was 6'5", 6'4", or something like that, near 300
Damn.
pounds, maybe even a little over 300. Just a big, awkward, funny looking kid,
Mm.
not fitting in well, not any of those things. I go to this family wedding,
Mhm.
and I'm at a family wedding. And for those of you who aren't from Pennsylvania, I don't know if you're familiar with a fire hall, but fire hall is like the cheapest place humans can rent to gather.
Okay.
So I don't know if you have them out Wisconsin way. I don't know if you have them in Mexico City, but
What do we
this
call them?
wedding,
We call them, I think, shacks in Mexico.
yeah,
in, uh,
that's fair.
in, in Wisconsin. Yeah, huts. We'll call them huts, little
Yeah,
chalets. Yeah,
it
yeah.
was like a little gym looking thing almost, and
Okay.
it was a family wedding. I think it was like my uncle or cousin. I don't even know who the heck it was, but somebody was getting married, and there was an open bar at the event. And I was the awkward 13-year-old kid sitting in the far corner, just wishing I was anywhere but there.
Mm.
And just watching the adults go up to the open bar, the plastic jugs that are like manned by a sad bartender who's probably making $4 an hour back then, and I watched all the adults go there and drink and start, laughing and dancing and having fun. And I was in the corner not having any fun at all. But being as smart as I am, I theorized if I went up to that bar and started drinking like the adults, I could have a better time. Because what they were doing looked attractive. What I was doing was not at all attractive. And
Okay.
so eventually I go up to that open bar, 13. And, thankfully I was larger than everybody else with a little bit of facial hair.
Okay.
I didn't ask any
Nice.
questions. So I grabbed the cup, I filled it, and I drank. I grabbed the cup and I filled it and I drank. And I kept repeating that process. And over the course of repeating that process that evening, the single greatest thing that ever happened to me in all 13 years of my life occurred. Because I
Wow.
suddenly felt that racing mind stop.
Wow.
I felt that ugly hole inside of me fill up. And I started to go out and laugh and dance and have a great time with the
Wow.
rest of the people until the end of the night when I got grounded for the rest of my life. Because when you're 13, you're not allowed to do stuff like that, make a fool of yourself. And,
Yeah.
so I got grounded. I got grounded
Yep.
forever, and it was a sad thing. And I went back home to my room, a place where I'd stay up all night long thinking about stuff. And
Mhm.
for the first time ever, I fell right asleep.
Wow.
And I woke up the next morning and I had at least a base understanding, a 13-year-old base understanding of what had occurred. Is
Mhm.
like I drank and it was awesome.
Mm. Mm-mm.
And so I made it my goal from that second on to obtain alcohol as often as I could.
Mm.
And thankfully, being a 13-year-old grounded into his room forever, for time immemorial, forever and ever, I had a 21-year-old uncle who thankfully went out to the liquor store, the state store around here in Pennsylvania. He obtained for me a squeeze bottle fifth of Governor's Club whiskey, and he hand delivered it to me in my room the next day. And I was so happy after I was done,
Oh.
parents went to sleep and everything. I grabbed that bottle out of my closet, and I untwisted the cap and I drank again. And the same magic that occurred the night before happened again for me. And
Hmm.
I knew I had to chase that feeling because that feeling was so much better than what I had felt for the previous 13 years
Right.
that it made too much sense. And so I drank as often as I could at 13, 14 years old. And
Mhm.
eventually, no matter what I'm drinking, that effect wasn't being produced anymore. So now I'm drinking a
Mm.
ton of alcohol and I'm still feeling a little off and a little disconnected and a little uncomfortable and a little racy in the mind.
Mhm.
It doesn't make sense because that thing that had worked so well for me for a couple of years wasn't really working anymore. And so
Yeah.
I got introduced to the thing you like to talk about, marijuana,
Chronic.
and marijuana was a little different back then. There were no
Right.
like stores for it or what, we got it through my friend's brother. And
Yeah.
when I smoked that, it produced that same effect. In addition to
Mm.
the same
Okay.
effect, the internal effect, it also made my eyes red and made me eat Doritos. And,
Oh
I love
yeah,
that
dude.
because
Munchie
I'm
game.
just, yeah, yeah, you get the munchies. You're a 300-pound man. Of course you love munchies.
Well, quick question for you, Chris. So you were feeling that effect from alcohol. Like, did it wear off, and is that why you went to weed, or like, what made you decide to add weed to that uh, concoction?
I mean, I feel like it was likely a mixture of it being available and near me, and
Mm.
also alcohol not really giving me what I needed, that
Ah,
full
gotcha.
effect of
Yeah.
just comfortability and intoxication. And that's what I lived for at that time in
Hmm.
my life. And I was so young, like I barely was even a person, you know,
Yeah.
I was just doing all this stuff and, smoking weed in the back of cars with my friends and
Uh-huh.
just all the crazy stuff that we used to do, like driving around and finding woods and weird old monuments. And being in Pennsylvania, we had like crazy old meeting houses from the 1700s we would break into and like just
Oh
sit
wow.
there and scare ourselves and be weird, stupid kids. And
Nice.
after a while, like that stopped being fun. That
Mm,
stopped
mhm.
producing that effect that it did. And I had to
Yeah.
then graduate to, pharmaceuticals and psychedelics and
Wow.
in their own unique ways, they produced that effect for me. They made me whole, they made me comfortable, and you know, it was perfect for a
Mhm.
period of time. And then after a while, they stopped working too, and I kind of
Yeah.
kept getting pushed up that train of substances. And I landed on cocaine next, and cocaine,
Okay.
took me a totally different direction because it was like the polar opposite of marijuana. It made me throw the Doritos out the window, run around like a maniac, and I loved it because it produced that same effect internally,
Mm,
and it
mhm.
made my mind race in a good way, a way I had never
Okay.
understood before. And it worked for a period of time. Then after a
Mhm.
while, it stopped producing that effect too. And
Mm,
then I just
wow.
get paranoid. Then I'm disappearing
Okay.
for 3 or 4 days at a time. Then I'm
Holy
just this
shit.
like nightmare of a human. I'm a manic, crazy person.
Wow.
And
And you're like 6'5", so if I saw you
yeah,
charging at me with those crazy eyes, I'd be like, "Oh, dude."
I didn't charge too many people. I was
Too
usually
many.
too
Okay.
focused on destroying more of my brain, and just
Okay.
like getting higher and keeping it going. And
Gotcha.
those were just interesting times. And after a while, cocaine stopped working,
Oh,
and now it's just making me paranoid. Now I'm just going crazy and
yeah.
disappearing, drinking NyQuil to try and sleep after 3 or 4 days, and just dumb stuff. But
Mm,
at that time, I knew that there was only one place left for me to go, and I was not willing to go there because I had
okay.
seen family members go to state prison for long periods of time. I'd seen people die of overdoses, well before it was common to
Mm,
die of overdoses. And, I was just not comfortable at all trying
mm,
heroin. I made a very firm and very conscious personal decision to draw that proverbial line in the sand. And I said, no, 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 no. This guy is never, ever, ever trying heroin.
mhm. Yeah.
And of course, contrary to my plan, I was at a keg party when I was about 17 years old, and I was standing right next to the keg where I always was, to make sure everybody was adhering to their 4 drink maximum. So there was some left
Nice.
for me later. And a guy approached me with a little wax paper bag full of brown powder, and he
Wow.
said, "Chris, would you like to try this?" To which I immediately responded, "Yes." It didn't make a lot of sense because no part of me was interested
Hmm.
in using it. Every part of me, in fact, was the polar opposite. I did not want to try it
Okay.
at all. But when given the opportunity, when approached with it in whatever state I was in that night, I
Hmm.
immediately said yes and consumed the heroin. And it took me way, way off into the stratosphere
Wow.
because it took that awful feeling in my brain, that racing thoughts, nightmare that was always going on, and it crushed it. It rendered my brain completely incapable of processing a thought.
Oh,
And that's what I had been looking for. That
oh
ugly
wow.
feeling inside was gone,
Oh my
totally gone. It was like being wrapped in the most perfect warm blanket.
God. Mhm.
Just, it was magical. And from that day on, I made it my absolute goal to obtain it as often as I possibly could because it was so much better than the life that I was living.
Mhm.
And man, it took me so many places, but I don't want to keep rambling here, but feel free, cut in.
Oh, man, dude, Chris, I appreciate you sharing that. And I could relate to so much of what you're talking about. And I think a really important part that you mentioned is that idea that, it is really good at the beginning. All the drugs, all the alcohol we do, there is that honeymoon phase. And I think it's important to acknowledge that.
Yeah,
And just like you said, it doesn't last. The high does not give the same effect anymore. And that's where so many people fall into addiction where they're just like they're chasing the dragon. I mean, the heroin's a perfect example. That's where that came from, right? Like the South
yeah.
Park episode where Stan's trying to shoot up the heroin from the Guitar Hero game. It's
I
just like
love
that.
that
And
episode.
yeah, it's like, oh, such a great,
Such a good
such a
episode.
funny episode. And yeah, it's just like you said, I think anybody can relate to a relationship, right? Like you have a relationship, it might have been great at the beginning. The love, the chemistry was there. There was emotions all over, and then a year down the line, you're like, wait a sec, this is not the relationship I thought it was in the beginning. And you see this too in relationships. So many people chase that purple dragon in the relationship. Like, if we can just get back to that first month when we were dating, oh, everything will be perfect, even though none of our values or our life aligns at all. And I think most people, especially heroin, probably are like, you know what? Heroin really doesn't align with who I want to be as a person. So, so for
Well,
you, what was your heroin continuation journey after you took that for the first time? Like, when did it get bad for you too? Like, when were you like, oh shit, this is not as fun
here's
anymore?
the fun common theme in my life, at least my life using drugs and alcohol. I didn't last more than 60 days on the street ever.
Mm,
Like I could not live life. From that moment on, it became a complete, almost comical situation. I mean, it
mm,
was tragic in the moment, but like now, if I look back, I'm just like, wow, how silly. How silly was I, to even do these things and be spurred into doing them. And,
mm,
now it's understandable. It was a brain illness. I
mm.
get it. My cerebral cortex wasn't operative at the time. The limbic system
Oh wow.
definitely fight or flighted me to death. And, I was constantly in fight or flight mode.
Oh, okay.
So what happened was, shortly after, I was always a professional waiter, at Friendlies.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever heard of Friendlies, but
I
it's like
have, yeah.
right. So it's like almost a kids themed ice cream restaurant. And I was always waiting tables there through all of my drugs, and
Wow.
15, 16, 17 years old. And when I got started on heroin, uh, I just could not wait tables anymore. I would have
Mm,
to disappear for 4 hours at a time to, drive out to Allentown, wait for the dope man, get my drugs, come back like nothing ever happened. They fired me rather quickly, unfortunately. In order to continue doing what I needed to do to feel okay, I needed money.
mhm.
And I started to, have to do stuff that a guy like me doesn't really do. I started to steal things from my mom, and
Mm.
I stole all of her DVDs, and that'll date me
Wow.
a little bit because, DVDs aren't even a thing anymore. But I
A
stole
what?
all her DVDs. Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
And back in the day, in the olden days of yore, for those of you who are a little younger, I used to be able to take those DVDs to a place called FYE.
Okay.
And they would give me like $3 per, $4 per, or $6 per DVD, whatever it was. And I utilized that to get by for a little bit. And after a while, my mom went to grab a DVD and put it in the DVD player, and neither of them were there. She got naturally upset.
Okay.
And so she gave me an ultimatum. She said, Chris,
Mm,
you can either go to detox or you can just get away. It's a paraphrase
wow.
version. I'm sure my mom was much more loving and caring than just get away from me, but she made it
Mhm.
clear that I needed to go to detox.
Okay.
And I was terrified because
Mm,
I was about to separate myself from the only thing in the world that made me me and made me comfortable and made me okay.
yeah.
And so I was literally peeing my pants, terrified to go into this detox at 18 years old. And I get in there, it's like an old state hospital, very dirty,
Yeah.
kind of low, poor people rehab because I was a
Okay.
poor person.
Okay.
And they send you in there and just kind of warehouse you. And it was one of those deals there. So I stayed for 7 or 8 days. Even if it was the greatest treatment center on earth, it would not have landed. I was 18. I didn't really understand what I was up against. I didn't understand what was happening. And really, truly, science didn't understand at that point what was happening with me. We were just kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall trying to help people.
Okay.
And I get in there for 6 days. I detox. I use, Suboxone detox that they give you. And, after a little bit there, I started to get my wits back, my mental faculties, if you will. And I
Mm,
figured, if I leave this place against medical advice, now I'm sober. I've been sober for like 8 days. Nobody's ever done that before. It's like a record in my
wow.
mind, I'm thinking. And so I hitchhike, I grab my Marlboro bag, I hook it over my shoulder, and I hitchhike down Route 422 to head back to Allentown until I convince my dad to come pick me up.
Okay.
And my dad also has no clue what he's up against. My
Whoa.
dad's a good, hardworking steel worker,
Okay.
just a good salt of the earth American guy. He had no idea. He had no clue what he was up against. I had no clue what I was up against because
Mm,
logically, I've been sober now 8 days, not
yeah.
counting Suboxone. I've been sober 8 days, and I figure if I get home, get a job, work a lot of hours, get back to my girlfriend, the world's going to work out perfectly because now I'm sober. Now I can
Okay.
exercise the use of my will intelligently.
Mm.
And how charade I was, man. I got back home, and within a couple hours, I left my parents' house with every intention of obtaining employment, and I found myself asleep in a bathroom, intoxicated very, very quickly.
Wow.
And I couldn't tell you exactly how it happened because,
Mm,
like, I just spent the last 8 days thinking about how I'm not going to do this, and I spent the
mm.
last 8 days hyper focused on making sure I didn't make the same mistakes I did. And the second I got the keys to my life back in my hands, I failed.
Wow. Wow.
And
What
I'm going
what
to
what do you think contributed to that? What was
I couldn't even begin to conjecture to tell you, other than in that 8 days, nothing had changed for me internally. I
mm,
hadn't learned all that much. I hadn't, been through any kind of brain changing therapies. I hadn't, found any kind of higher power. I hadn't nothing changed other than I was physically sober for 8 or 9 days. And I, listened to the Goo Goo Dolls and watched Super Bear 50 or whatever it was, like
Iris
nothing.
didn't get you sober, man? What? What? It didn't
No,
change your life? Such a good
no,
song.
it was like oh 05. So I think they had just come out with like Better Days or something, and I'd be
Ah,
sitting
okay.
sitting in detox, like crying my eyes out, just oh, this song is so good, and like when I get out of here, it's gonna be a better day.
Okay.
And the second I got out,
Same.
failure,
Mm,
automatic failure, and it made me feel a whole lot better because I was high again. I was
mm,
comfortable, and I'd gone back to that thing that made me
okay.
okay. But I ran into a dilemma real quick because my
Uh-huh.
parents had their electronics reguarded. They knew what was
Wow.
going to happen. And so I had to start doing other things like going into other people's houses and taking their belongings. And
Whoa.
I'm just a good suburban kid,
Mm,
like I'm not that guy. I do
mhm.
not like to hurt people. But
Uh-huh.
here I was breaking into people's houses.
Yeah.
And within, God, 30 days of leaving that detox, I was getting arrested on felony burglary charges.
Wow.
And I'm like
Oh,
18.5, I'm not that
oh,
old.
yeah,
And
but old enough.
yeah,
Old
and
enough, yeah.
all I knew at that point was what TV was telling me about jail. Is like Bubba's coming to get you and
Oh, man.
it's going down.
You're gonna have a cuddle buddy, and it's gonna be a rough time. Yeah.
And I was mortified. Like a month prior, I was peeing my pants. I was so scared to go to detox. And now I'm going to jail. And there's like no option here. Because like the Macungie
Wow.
police they were rather forceful. You know, they didn't take kindly to the fact that I walked into somebody else's house and scared them. And,
Mm.
you know, not a good thing. You know, now I'm scared. Like I know Bubba's in there. I'm terrified.
Mm.
And I get in, there's no Bubba, but you know, I have to put on the monochrome colored uniform. I trade in my name for the first time to become number 0131644. It will become a common theme for me over the next couple of years to trade
Okay.
in Chris Dreisbach and become 0131644. That was my number. That will always be my number
Wow.
in the LA County,
Oh
and
my
I will remember
God.
it till the day I die because I,
Mm.
you know, spent several hundred days just hanging out, being called out 0131644. You know,
I'm gonna change
uh,
your name right now from
don't do
Instagram
it.
at
Don't do it.
016.
Maybe one
Yeah.
day we'll do
Yeah.
that.
Maybe one day.
But you know, now I'm in jail, and like jail, it's such a dehumanizing experience to be
Okay.
taken away from your life. You know, stripped down, put in a monochrome colored uniform. You know, forced to wear county underpants is like a joke that I make all the time because you know I had to wear somebody else's underwear for months and months at a time,
Mm.
and you know, be told when to wake up, told when to go to sleep, told when to eat, told when to move, told when to breathe, told when to this, told when to that. And truly, nothing corrective, even remotely debatably corrective, occurred when I was in jail. I was warehoused for, I don't know how many days it was the first time. It's 90, 100, whatever it might have been. And for that number of days, I sat in my bunk and I thought, like, man, this has got to be sufficient pain. There's no way I'm going to relapse after this because I don't want to be a letdown. I don't want to be that guy who
Mhm.
disappoints my family. I don't want to be a felon. You know, I was at that point.
Yeah.
And, like, you know, I thought at 18 and a half, 19 years old, I had destroyed my entire life
Mm.
already, you know, and being tossed in that cage and told you're worthless and, you know, just made to feel like an animal or less than human didn't really do a whole lot to motivate me to be better when I got out.
Mm. Okay.
Despite that, I still had a plan is when I get out, I'm going to get a job, I'm going to work a lot of hours, get back with my girlfriend because now I've been sober for a ton of days. Nobody's ever done that. It's going to be a mega record, you know? And I got out, and within a couple hours, man, I got the keys to my life back in my hands, and I failed. I was in that bathroom again
Wow.
right
Wow.
away, same day service, you know? And it sucked so much more this time because I had a PO and my parole officer. For those of you who aren't familiar with, you know, how the justice system works, he wanted me to pee in a cup. And when I'm using heroin, I don't pee in the cup the way he wants me to. And so he gave me an ultimatum. A couple days after leaving jail, he's like, Chris, you'll have 7 days to fix this problem or you're going back to jail.
Whoa.
Let's establish I did not want to go back to jail. Zero
Uh-huh.
percent of me wanted to go back to jail. So the math
Yeah.
started in my head. I knew I had four
Okay.
days to keep going,
Okay.
this many. And
Okay.
then and those 4 days slid by really effortlessly. And I knew the
Mm.
day that I had to get clean, 100% had to get clean or I was going back to jail. I woke up and I found that I couldn't.
Whoa.
And man,
Yeah.
there's not much more demoralizing than doing something like that against your will when you know the consequences are coming down the pike and they're going to hit you.
Mm.
And goodness gracious, you know, like the next day came and I knew I had 2 days to go see my PO. And I found I couldn't stop. And I came up with cockamamie ideas like I was going to eat a bunch of niacin and drink water. And I did the same thing the night before, you know, because
Mhm.
in my mind, in my heart of hearts, I wasn't going back. I'm willing to go to any lengths to not go back to jail. But for
Mm.
some reason, I can't seem to stop doing the thing that's going to send me there. And eventually it came up that the day I was supposed to go meet my PO and you know, pee clean for him, I took other people's stuff to a pawn shop. I grabbed my girlfriend and I ran to North Carolina
Wow.
because we
Wow.
established I'm not going back. No.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so here's what
And
happened.
did your girlfriend use as well? Were you guys did you guys
She
use
did.
together? Yeah.
She did. Yeah, yeah, we did. You know, it's a rough situation, two
Mhm.
teenagers, you know, and
Yeah.
man, Well, here's where it gets kind of funny because within 10 days, I got arrested in Buffalo, New York.
Wow.
So for those of
For
you who are really missed out on the American geography, if you're not familiar with the East Coast, North Carolina is like way south, and Buffalo is way north of where I was. And
wow.
that alone could be an entertaining podcast story. Just
Yeah, we might have to do it
talking about
sometime for sure. Road trip with
yeah,
0124
0131644.
012.
Get
Yeah.
it right.
Oh man, that's
But yeah,
crazy, dude.
so now I'm like 19 and I'm in jail in Buffalo. I don't know if
Mm,
you ever been to Buffalo, Joel.
nope.
Buffalo's very cold. It's right
Okay.
on Lake Erie. It's freezing. I got arrested at the end of October, and it was freezing. It was terrible, just awful up there. I was detoxing on heroin after a 10-day run up and down the East Coast trying to hide from parole, hide from law enforcement. It was terrible. So the jail, Erie County Correctional Facility, was also super ultra overcrowded at the time, and we were all hucked into the gym, the little gymnasium on the little boat beds. You ever see those things? Like the things they'll give like a 5-year-old to sleep in.
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
Google that if you've never seen
Okay.
like a boat bed. It's just like a little
Okay.
plastic thing. It's terrible. No real mattress. You just like on a plastic thing in a gym. And the worst part of it was I was in there with at least 100 other people. Most of us were detoxing, and we had one toilet and one
Um.
sink to
Oh,
share.
dude.
And
Uh.
I mean, it started this multiple day experience where I'm in this intake gym and like people are defecating on themselves, urinating on themselves, and puking on ourselves. Like we were just a hideous mess. And
Wow,
I'm thinking that whole
dude.
time, there
Yeah.
has got to be, like, that has to be sufficient buffering for me. Like, I cannot do drugs again. I am done. And
Oh
so after
no.
10 days, I went to the Supreme Court and they shipped me back to Allentown where I belonged. And I got there and I got to see the judge, and he was like, dude, you're 19. This ain't working. We just found you in Buffalo. You got charges up there. You got charges in North Carolina. You were on parole. You never should have left. You know, paraphrase version. After your time, I'm going to send you to treatment.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, sounds good. And so after I hung out in jail for a whole bunch of months, they sent me to this place called, I'm not even going to name them on this podcast, but it was a place in downtown Allentown,
Okay.
and it was a therapeutic community. Are you familiar with the therapeutic community model?
I think so. And guys, if you want to know the exact name, there's a PDF you can download in the description that'll it's 30 different resources where you can
Oh,
have the exact name of these groups and you'll know what it is. You'll know
you
what it
don't want
is.
to go to this group. Trust me.
Ah,
Trust.
okay. Okay.
So the therapeutic community is like a behavior modification idea through the Department of Corrections. And the idea behind it is if they correct our behavior, we won't do bad stuff again. Which, if you know anything about brain science of addiction, complete waste of time.
Yeah, okay.
Absolute huge waste of time.
So
So
Chris,
I
this is
learned.
this is in God Grant Me the Serenity group.
What's that?
This isn't the God Grant Me the Serenity group, is it? Okay,
No,
my
no,
bad.
no,
No, this group is
no.
not on that list. So this sounds way worse. So yes, continue.
I mean, like if I was just a bad kid who misbehaved, it might have worked really well for me. If I had a substance use disorder that is a brain illness, it is completely ineffective.
Mm,
But that's what they masqueraded it as. It's like, this will help you with your addiction. So I'm like, cool. I was the nerd. I sat in the front row. I listened to everything I could listen to. I kept my shirt tucked in the whole time, like they told me to. And I sang in front of the group to embarrass me. And I sat in the corner and I wore a dunce cap for 24 hours if I did something wrong. And like, just the silliest, most dehumanizing garbage you could think of.
wow.
But I did all of it because I was convinced that I had to do something
Mm,
because I didn't want
okay.
to keep living that life in that way that I was.
Mhm.
And I graduated from that. I got my little certificate, said my behavior was good, and I got out and I relapsed right away.
Right away,
Instantly, man.
man.
Such a disappointment because I had just spent a year physically sober. I just spent a year
Wow.
trapped in a cage. I spent a year in, just stuff that I don't want to do, stuff that 20-year-old me doesn't want any part of, you know?
Mhm.
And I get out of this place, and it started a 60-day period of my life that was absolutely filled with misery. There was no hope on the horizon. I'm 20 years old, and I'm like watching my friends from high school go off and develop relationships with people. I am like bouncing from couch to homeless to park to eating out of dumpster, dipping off to a psych ward to hide from my PO, just all these terrible things. And through the whole thing, the worst part of it all was that there was no hope for me. I just felt like I was on a vicious cycle for the rest of my life, and it was never going to get better. And when you have no hope, like there's nothing good. It's just misery and misery on misery. And I'm so thankful now to be able to be a light for people who feel that way. Because if you feel that way, you don't have to for very long. Especially now, there's resources everywhere. And there's so many people like me who are fired up to help you get where you got to go. And for me, it didn't happen quite normally. August 27th, 2007, which is to this day, my sobriety date, recovery
Wow.
date, whatever you want to call it.
Beautiful.
I was walking in a region of downtown Allentown, and the Allentown Vice Squad pulled me over, even though I was, walking. They pulled me over and said, "Put your hands against the wall," because they knew I was on parole. And they took me back to jail, and I had a needle in my pocket. So a possession of hypodermic instrument was my last
Okay.
criminal charge. And they sent me back, and I, called my dad, and I was like, "Pop, it happened again. Here we are." I was confident I was never going to get better. It was just going to be forever.
Yeah.
And the judge, he was like, "Dude, you're 20. This ain't working out very well. I'm going to send you to treatment." And I was like, "Whatever, dude. That doesn't work,
Okay.
But, do your thing, because I'm sure I'll fail and be back a couple hours anyway.
Okay.
And so eventually they sent me to another treatment center, one that is much, much, much more therapy oriented.
Okay.
And even though this was 2007, the treatment modalities weren't quite as far advanced as they are now in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
But they did the best they could, and they guided me to move to a halfway house instead of go back to Allentown and try again. And
Okay.
I got shipped to a halfway house here in Lancaster County, and I literally, haven't left this area. I mean, I do leave frequently, but
Yeah.
I still live here, and like this area, I got plugged in with some guys in those support groups, and those guys were young and they were fired
Okay.
up, and
Oh yeah.
they were talking like I couldn't even believe. They were talking about doing stuff like I used to do, but they were genuinely happy. You could see that they were just excited to be alive. And I was like, man, how do I do this? How do
I
I
get that.
become like you guys? And they took me under their wing and they showed me a completely different way to live. And that's a good spot to stop for a second and
let's
unpack
let's process that. Yeah, dude. Oh my God, Chris, man, that was I felt a bit of that story. Like I could put myself in those shoes. I'll never know what that's like. But that was a very powerful story. So thank you for sharing all that and really letting people know that how far you fell. And I think that's as painful as it is, it's beautiful that you can look back on it and talk about it with such non-attachment. It's very much like you're just reading a book. And I think just like with any breakup, anything, I like to relate it back to relationships, because I think that's the easiest to kind of relate with. I mean, you've broken up with someone, you look back a year later and you barely remember them, and you just are like grateful that it probably didn't work out. So that is just so wild, man. And one of my good friends, he was a heroin user too, and he's been on the channel too, and we still talk every week to this day, and he's helped me in a lot of areas. But he's never told me I don't think it got that bad to where, bro, I can't imagine that when I was quitting, one of the big motivators for me was I was near going to prison. Like I was selling weed and stuff, a lot like pounds and ounces and of dabs and stuff. And so, and I got in trouble with the police the night I quit. Thankfully, I only had like a little bit on me, but in that moment when the cop was writing the ticket, I saw that premonition of I'm like, dude, I ain't doing well in prison. First off, I'm gonna have a bad time. Some other guys are gonna have a good time, but I'm not gonna have a good time. And it
Oh,
was that fear of prison that made me quit. So, quick question on the prison for you. Um, how like what was that like? Like what was I mean, you shared a bit about it, but it doesn't sound
I mean,
fun.
so I was in Lehigh County Prison. Not like a super scary, dangerous prison. It was rather new, and I mean, I saw some fights and some violence and a stabbing or two, but like
Wow.
nothing, came to me. Um,
Okay. Yeah,
Nothing
you're
like super traumatic happened to me in jail,
okay.
but just being taken out of your life and
Mm,
put in a uniform and tossed in a 6x8 cage with another person, going to the bathroom in front of them 23 hours a day, whatever it might have been, like there's something about that definitely
mm,
causes some long-term trauma because
okay.
we're humans. We're, social creatures. We're supposed to be out in the sunlight. We're supposed to
Mm,
be developing relationships. And it's not to say that I didn't develop some good, lifelong relationships with people that I was in jail with, but uh, man, the whole point of a lot of the work I do with blueprints and the social programs we've started is to divert people away from the criminal justice system. Because had I, been spared of those several hundred days, my parents wouldn't have had to wake up and go to work and be embarrassed that their kid was in the paper, that their kid's a
mhm,
felon. They wouldn't have to wake up and, just be ashamed to be
mhm.
related to me. And like I could have saved them all that stress, all that trouble, and all those problems if we just had a solution for it back then, like we do right now.
Man, that's beautiful. I want to share a comment here from Smiley Fairchild. Uh, dude, thanks for coming on, man. I take it you know Chris, and that's just awesome, man. That you get to connect and have that awesome connection. That's super powerful.
I love
Um,
that. Thank you. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. So what's up, Smiley Fairchild? Great to see you. We got Huds. Great to see you, brother. Evening, gents, and he's a Philly native, so. Um,
Right.
I heard it's a wild place for sure. So, um,
It's fun. Fun
and then
here.
we have Mr. Spicy going strong in 2024. Thank you, brother. Thanks for tuning in. We're gonna have a spicy year, but in the good way. So keeping it alive. And so, man, I'm just really just reflecting here, and just I felt a lot of gratitude when I hear this story because I'll share today. I'm going through some stuff that's quite difficult mentally, and you're right, when that hope's gone, life can seem very bleak. And I think it's just a good reminder that to be grateful for the fact that we can go outside and go for a walk, we can go get food, we can go fill up a cup of water and drink.
Yeah.
It just really puts things in perspective. And it's almost weird because there's a part of me that wanted to get arrested. There's a part of me that wanted to go to jail so I could start to appreciate life, which is just the most wild thing. I think I was almost like, just give me like, I just wanted a quick fix, like a momentary, just where everything just kind of fell into place. So where I want to go from here is, Chris, so you got into recovery programs. What was that journey like from you to finding that peace in your life and finding that reason to live?
The most messed up part of it was I didn't believe anything would work. I went into it just scoffing,
Mm,
completely not interested.
mm,
And it still worked. It still worked. Here's the kicker is I
wow.
showed up wherever, my guide or sponsor or whatever you want to call him, wherever he told me to show up, I showed up. Whatever he told me to do, as silly as it was, I did it. And honestly, through like even the silliest little things, he'd have me go back to the halfway house and fold another dude's laundry.
Mm,
Now, mind you, I'm like minutes out of jail. Like I'm not folding another dude's laundry. 0% of me is interested in that. But he was like, just go do it. Call me in the morning. Just go do it. Call me in the morning. Over and over, he's sending me off on these dumb little tasks that I
okay.
have no interest in doing. And after a while, it started to make sense as I was doing things
Ah,
for other people and getting
mm,
nothing in return, like
yeah.
directly in return. And after a while of getting into the habit of doing selfless things for the benefit of other people, not me, I started to decrease that selfishness that was such a
Mm,
plague on my life. And I started to learn how much I loved serving others and how much I loved being a part of other people's lives. And like even in the silliest ways, like folding somebody's laundry, man, I saved him like 8 minutes of effort and didn't take credit for it. You know,
Mhm.
and like as minuscule and non-existent as that is right now to me, it's still the same theory when I show
Mhm.
up to do a podcast. You know, when I show up to talk to a group of people who are in rehab or a group of people who are in jail or whatever it might be, it's that same heart, that same spirit that comes with that. And I was just being trained early on in the simplest ways, probably because I was so dumb I never would have actually listened or realized it. And man, just what a blessing it is to have people who've tread the path before us
Mhm.
show us the way. And I'm forever
Absolutely.
grateful to that group of guys, man, forever.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful, man. Could relate a lot to that. Just the importance of service, and this is not new to. This is not a new concept. They really preach it when you get into these groups, and I think a lot of people have resistance. I didn't want to go get a volunteer job. I didn't want to go, you know, be of help or clean up after a meeting. And it's like every time you do that, though, you realize, okay, I didn't die. I actually feel good, and like I feel useful. I think that's a big thing of it because when we're in addiction, we feel so helpless because all we can do is focus on is getting our drugs or booze or whatever it is. So when we get out there and actually add value to other people's lives, you just realize that you do have value, even if it's a small amount. And that, as I always say in my videos, like it's just about getting to the next day. Like if you can do something that can just get you to go to bed and wake up the next morning sober, that's a win. That's a win if you can do that every day because that's what's going to get those weeks, those months, those years compounded when you can just make it to the next day. And some days, as great as recovery is and as beautiful of moments we have, we're going to have moments that are going to be tough and difficult. And we have to come back to that. Okay, how can I be of service? How can I get out of my own head and ironically into somebody else's with their permission, of course. That's codependency if they don't ask. So we don't want to do that, but in a way that they appreciate. So I think that's a great message, and it's a great message to anyone watching this that if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling like purposeless, get out and be of help to somebody. Just even if it's for a few minutes a day, just try it. And if it doesn't work, money back. We'll give you your money back, promise you. Which is you're not paying us, but the point is that it will make a difference in a transformation. And I'll share like a personal story. Like a couple weeks ago, I had kind of a mini relationship kind of start to take a turn south, and man, it was just like so disappointing. And so I hopped on a call with a guy, and we gave him some. We focused on his dating life, and I completely forgot about the whole situation, and it was just that's the beauty of it. You get out of your own head, and it came back for sure. It wasn't like a lasting thing, but it gave me that clarity that okay, there is a solution to feeling bad, and that's being of service. So beautiful point there, Chris. I kind of want to dive in a little bit too on what you're doing today because you know blueprints for addiction recovery, like that's so sick. First off, your logo is dope, and
Thank you. Thank you.
tell us a little bit about that. Like what is this organization? What do you do?
So it's a bit of a tale, but I started
Tail away.
working at that rehab.
Okay.
Actually, when I was at the halfway house, I started working at a diner. And the diner, I was like an overnight waiter at, just doing the thing that I did best, just serving people
Mm.
food because I am so skilled at basically nothing. That's what I did. And eventually, after a couple of years, they made me a manager, and like it was great. I wanted to work there for the rest of my life. And one
Mm.
morning at like 4 a.m., they unceremoniously fired me.
Uh,
And I was
okay.
like, this is the end of my life.
Mm.
This is what I wanted to do. And I had been going down to the rehab that I went through to take meetings like once a week, on my only day off. And the next day I went back down there and I was like, hey, y'all got a job?
Uh.
I just got fired.
Fuck it.
And, being from the era of like, you just always have to have a job, always work. I loved working. The next
Mhm.
day I got hired at that rehab and I drove 70 miles one way to make $9 an hour to
Wow.
be a tech at that rehab. And it was one
Wow.
of the coolest years of my life.
Cool,
Even
man.
though I lost a pile of money, I got to see people lay the groundwork for lifelong recovery the same way I did.
Mm.
And eventually, I could no longer afford to drive down there.
Yeah.
It cost too much.
Yeah.
And this set of circumstances happened that I ended up opening the first transitional recovery house in Lancaster, Pennsylvania,
Sweet.
because a bunch of my friends were all about to be homeless at the same time from that halfway
Wow.
house.
Yeah.
We went out and rented a house and let them live there. We developed a guideline sheet to like 64 points to help them in that early recovery period. And
Mm-hmm.
what happened was like those first 10 dudes, so many of them stayed sober long term that other people wanted to come be a part of it. And like, I had to go rent another house and then rent another house. And eventually I landed on a landlord who taught me how to succeed in real estate. He said, stop
Wow.
renting, buy these houses. And I was like,
Okay.
dude, I have like 3 years out of jail. I have, a couple $1,000. So how am I going to
Uh-huh.
buy a house, you idiot? He gave me a loan to buy my first house.
Wow.
And this is just a guy that I rented a house from. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's where I lived. And the only reason I landed on his house was because he was the only landlord around here that would let you smoke cigarettes and have a dog at the same time.
Oh,
And just
perfect.
pure happenstance, he taught me real estate. He taught me how to make money. And like,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't even make a whole lot of sense because I didn't launch into it to make money. It was just like,
Mm-hmm.
shit, my friends need a place to go. And like, I
Yeah.
love recovery. I love helping people.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually that thing blew up into like an actual full blown business. We had like 170 beds and 12
Oh,
or
beautiful.
13 houses. And so many people started lifelong recovery through that. It was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I had an employee, Brooke, who still works for Blueprint and is amazing. She's a billing manager now. And she just kept kind of saying, like, we should start an outpatient. We should start a rehab. We should start a this. And I just kept saying no and no and no and no because I didn't want to deal with the state. I didn't want to,
Mm-hmm.
do all the stuff. I just wanted to
Mm-hmm.
help people, and
Yeah.
eventually circumstances came up that I met Ben McCoy, who's our executive vice president of Blueprints, and
Cool.
he is an absolute wizard at most of those things that I am not a wizard at.
Mm-hmm.
We combined with another guy, Jesse, to form the weird triumvirate of Blueprints, and Jesse's really good at operational things and spreadsheets and other stuff that I'm not that great at. So we
Okay.
came together and became a really, really well-oiled machine, and
Okay.
started our little tiny outpatient in Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania. Our little 4,000
That's
square
incredible,
foot
man.
office. And it was so cool.
Cool.
Same spirit as the original recovery houses is just come
Mm-hmm.
here. Who cares what funding source you have? Like we really
Mm-hmm.
wanted to provide transportation. We wanted to provide all these
Nice.
things that nobody else was providing to crush those barriers and the things that keep people away from therapy and away
Okay.
from treatment. And we called it the grand experiment. It was like, can you provide high quality treatment with amenities and still accept Medicaid, accept people who can't afford anything? Can you show everybody the same love that rich people get?
Okay.
And weird enough, it worked. It worked really
Wow.
well. It wasn't without a ton of struggles and
Mm-hmm.
problems, but I'll tell
Mm-hmm.
you, like the community around Blueprints right now is unbelievable.
Oh,
I mean, the
let's go.
energy is palpable when you walk into a
Mm-hmm.
Blueprints facility. Because, I mean, one of my favorite quotes, I believe, was from like a satisfaction survey that we do at the end of every week or whatever it is. My favorite quote from, anonymous client at Blueprints was, I walk around the facility and I still have yet to find somebody who doesn't give a fuck about me, doesn't not love, like just,
Mm-hmm.
man, I've been to
Yeah.
so many rehabs, and most of the people are just there for paychecks. They're just like
Okay.
there to survive. And at Blueprints, like, everybody is so dedicated to like the full health of the person that we get to serve.
Mm-hmm.
And we have like 175 employees, and
Oh my God.
darn near every single one of those employees are incredible. I
Wow.
mean, the
Oh, that's
most
beautiful, man.
caring. It's beautiful, and I
Mm-hmm.
can't take much credit for it because like I don't have that much time to go spend on the day to day. And
Okay.
today I was there at one of the facilities, and just the love. I love it so much.
Oh,
Just being even a tiny part of somebody's recovery journey, and wow. What an honor. What an honor.
Dude, that's so beautiful, man. First off, congratulations on doing that. I think I mean, congratulations cuts it. It's thank you for that service for the world and for helping so many people's lives. And it's amazing that you're so passionate about it and that you've been able to grow something from such a rough spot that you can create something now that can give back and help so many people. So that is beautiful, man. That is absolutely beautiful.
Thank you. And then really the important stuff is we launched out on a thing we call Second Chance PA, which is a
Mm,
pre-arrest diversion program that just turned 5 years old last week.
wow.
And so what
Let's
we
go.
do is we send certified recovery specialists out on scene with law enforcement. And
Oh, wow.
at that point of crisis, the law enforcement officer has the opportunity to give the person treatment instead of jail.
Whoa.
Think about that one. Think about that one.
Yeah, that sounds much better. And it's not treatment like the first treatment you went to. It sounds like this real treatment. Like you're gonna get
Yeah,
better treatment.
it's very individualized. So the CRS will go through a screening and assessment process with the person and make sure that they get connected to the best facility that they yeah, for them.
Mm,
It's not
yep.
just a blanket like, oh, hey, this is a person, go to DOC treatment number 8.
Okay.
It's just there's a bed available, go there. It's
Okay.
actually matching them up with a place that's going to fit them for the
Okay.
specific problems that they have because everybody's so different. You can't throw a blanket over addiction and just be like, yeah, we'll fix it with this.
Mm,
We have to dig deep into every person's situation, their
mm,
socioeconomic deals, their, childhood traumas, how they grew up, stuff that's happened to
right.
them in the interim. There's just millions and millions of different variables. And kind of diving deep into that individualization is what has given
Okay.
us the most success.
Oh, I think that's so important. Yeah, it definitely gets overlooked. Like, and it's a good reminder for me to mention that too more on my videos. That hey, this what might work for one might not work for the other. So it really is personal, and each person's going to have their own story, their own adventure. What I always say though at the end is that one day you will be able to help other people and share your story, and anybody watching this would be able to create a YouTube channel and help thousands of people because
Yeah.
it's your story is your own story, and it's so unique and personal. I think something really cool about that story too that stood out, and we talked about this a little bit before about chance happenings, right? And so that's kind of where I want to kind of dive into because it's exciting. It's exciting when things happen that you don't expect, but they absolutely change your life. And so I'll share with one of my good friends, Nick. He's been on the channel. He's the guy that used heroin, and we've done a podcast together. I met him at a meeting for work addiction, an online Zoom meeting. And I just happened to be talking about dating. Like I was like, yeah, I think I'm tying my worth to money, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh yeah, let's talk a little bit after. So it happens that he had been on this huge dating quest where we went out to different countries and dated for like 5 years, met thousands of different people, learned how to actually attract and retain romantic relationships. And now he has a wife, he has a kid, he has kids. And we've been talking almost every week, and he's guided me to make some huge changes in my life. I went to Poland in the spring off his recommendation, completely changed my life. Came back to the US for a little bit and then came out here to Mexico. He's like, dude, this would be great for you. It's going to be really important to get out of, the US for dating purposes anyway. They have great recovery, but for dating, it can be, a hit or miss. And so if I wouldn't have just logged on to that random meeting that night, that I didn't even want to go to. I was just like, I just probably should go because I'm feeling like a bum. Uh, I wouldn't be sitting right here right now in Mexico City. So it's absolutely wild. And like with your thing with the blueprints, right? Like you just so happened to meet a guy that got you into real estate and just was willing to loan you that financial gift. And I think what I like too is that he loaned it to you, but it was a secured loan. So if anyone goes to the debt addiction meeting, because there is one for debt addiction, they say there's good debt and bad debt, and good debt is debt that's backed by either assets that are worth more than the payment. So like, let's say I buy a guitar, I put $1,000 down in cash, and then I put $1,000 on a loan. Because the guitar is worth 2,000, if I were to ever sell it, I could pay back that loan instantly. I still don't like to do that because I try to stay away from it all completely, but it's good to know that there's those two different kinds. So you were in good debt, so that's a good thing that you could pay back by selling the house.
Significant good debt, to the point where in the early days, everybody who was my advisor, like my dad, bless his soul, especially if he's watching, love you, old man. Uh, he would always tell me, like, stop doing this. You're
Mm,
nuts. Like, you're taking on, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And like, how are you ever going to pay that off? How are you ever going to figure this thing out? And as much as I love my dad, I am so glad I didn't listen to him
mhm.
on that particular situation, because
Yeah.
the more I opened myself up to those risks, and the more I would shove fear to the side, the bigger and better my life would become.
Mm,
And not
mhm,
just financially, because good God, like, I've been in crippling debt,
mm.
and some of the worst, most terrifying cash crunches that would keep me up for almost days on end. Uh, but I can tell you, the number of people I've been able to impact with each successive move grew,
Mm,
and the number of people whose lives were reformed and restored with each successive move grew, and the little army of people who would go on to help other people grew, and then
cool.
more people would help other people, and that grew into 12 other companies that
Wow.
I now have a hand in or a part in.
Okay.
And it's just unbelievable. Every
Unbelievable.
single time that this happens, we get to build an entrepreneur. We get to build somebody
Mhm.
up and let them achieve their dream of entrepreneurship. And like, it all happened by pure happenstance at the beginning. And I
Yeah.
discovered a passion that I have, and I've been able to follow it for the last 17 years.
Wow.
And,
Oh my
uh,
God.
guys like me don't get to do stuff like that. Guys like me have poor willpower. Guys like me go to jail with bad people.
Mm,
And truly bad people. I mean, some, I'm sure, were able to pull stuff like that off, but I can't imagine them doing it this way.
mm.
Everything, like Shannon Moore, my good friend Shannon, who's in the Night of Recovery documentary with me. He always says, and pretty much every time I see him, is your story is your greatest asset. And what
Wow.
you said earlier about being able to, share your story and move on and help thousands of people, it mirrors exactly what Shannon says, and it's 100% true.
Yeah. Yeah. And the biggest act of service you can do is go through that painful process of getting clean. That's the best thing you can do for the world, because it's going to help way more people than just yourself. And bonus, you're going to get to have some really cool moments as well. So, tell us about this documentary. Like, what's up with that? Like,
Man, so through the course of, uh, I think we were doing excuse me, I'm still getting over a little, coronavirus or death flu or whatever the heck's been going around
ah,
here. Um, the Through the course of circumstances, we've been doing these police trainings, because when we bring a police department on board for Second Chance, we give them a 1 hour training on brain science, continuum of care, and kind of how to bring somebody from hopelessly addicted to living a life of purpose. And it really
mm,
shifts their perceptions and allows them to go back out on the street and say, this is a person, I really want to help him. And
mm,
uh, purely random, the
mm,
one police chief that was sponsoring the training had called a guy named Andy Shankman up to film it, so that we could send the training video out to new officers and not always have to physically do it ourselves. And this guy, Andy, he just gave me his card. Him and his wife were doing the filming and making the video, and they were just such sweet people. I loved them from the second I met them. And I put his card in my pocket and, added it to the pile of 8 billion business cards that I have, and didn't think much more of it. And eventually, we got this idea. Jesus Rodriguez, my good friend, came here. We wanted to start talking about doing a documentary on him. He was in the WWE. He had a crazy, crazy life, traveling all over the world and doing this stuff. And
dope.
I thought, who do I know who can make documentaries? And I reached out to a couple people I knew, and they gave me some absurdly high mega quotes of like 50 grand to do this and 40 to do that. And I was like, okay, no thanks. And I called Andy. I called Andy up and I was like, hey, Andy, I met you a couple months ago at the police training. You probably don't remember me, but I have this crazy idea. You want to hear about it? And he listened to it and he said, yes, absolutely.
Nice.
He didn't
Nice.
say anything about money. He didn't say anything about anything like that. He was just like, yes.
Okay.
And Andy and I got to know each other, and just what a tremendous human being Andy Shankman is. Him and his whole family just never really understood much about recovery, never really had a passion for recovery, nothing like that. He'd never been introduced to it until that training. And
Okay.
man, like he just dove so far into this. So we actually started filming the documentary that'll probably be released in like 2097 because we're so far behind on everything.
Nice. Nice.
But in the interim, I linked up with a bunch of other guys that had wrestled in the WWE, and
Okay.
just through their awesome wellness program, they do this thing where if you've ever worked for them for even one day as a talent, they'll send you to rehab if you have a problem immediately, free of charge. Probably the
Wow.
coolest program on earth.
Cool.
Huge fan of that. And uh, what ended up happening was I connected with Shannon Moore, Sean Waltman, and Kurt Hussey, who wrestled in WWE as Fandango. Sean was X-Pac, and Jesus was Ricardo Rodriguez during his time there.
Mm.
And so what happened was we did this event at the Ware Center in Lancaster before one of our wrestling shows, because one of our companies is Three Legacies Wrestling, because we're just completely nuts, And so we did this recovery talk, Night of Recovery, and it was those three guys and me as the host. And, my good friend Brandon Novak jumped in as a surprise guest because he had actually inspired Kurt through some of his videos to seek sobriety. And it was just really cool to make that surprise. And Andy and Harley and Keith, our production crew, filmed it. And so we went through the long process of trying to get it chopped out to places and,
Okay.
somebody to release it. And we learned so much over that, 8 or 9 months of unscrupulous people and just all kinds of crazy things in that world. And eventually we landed with the Night of Recovery live from the Moravian Center, which was another one we had done in August, I believe. August of this year. It wasn't even that long ago. And Andy, just went to war, figured out exactly how to do this, and got us in touch with Prime Video, Bezos, Amazon, the big boys.
The big
And
B.
the big B, never met him. Hope one day to. But, him and his team graciously allowed us to get that on Prime Video.
Wow.
And Night of Recovery live from the Moravian Center has been
Oh,
live for
sweet.
a little bit less than a month, and we've been getting so much
Oh, dude.
positive reaction. I mean, like we did a thing last week with the Portland Free Herald, or whatever the paper in Portland, Maine, which is where Kurt's from, and it was like our first talk with a movie reviewer, like an actual movie critic, and he said, like, Chris, I didn't expect this. I expected some, like, just something completely different. And what I saw was so raw and so real that even though I don't know much about recovery, I do now. And like he was just over the moon, excited about it. He wrote up a beast of a review. It was so
Oh,
wonderful
cool.
to read. And yeah, hey, there it is. Look at that. You got the link right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And, we got just so many people have been reaching out about,
Cool.
how the stories have been impactful and how seeing guys that they watched on TV relate in such personal ways to the way that they felt has led them towards recovery. And just, man, I can't wait to continue to do more and more things like that and reach out to more and more people and offer more and more people support and let them know that you don't have to be ashamed of this thing. It's not something to be afraid of or ashamed of. Just reach out for help and live free. And man, just what a blessing that it has been. And just this morning, we found out that our 4-part docuseries Repurposed, it was also released on Prime Video.
Let's
And
go, dude.
I know, right? It's wild. And for that one, it's 4 individual interview stories with notable folks in recovery. And the
Cool.
first one is Brandon Novak. I don't know if you're too familiar with him, but just an
Mm,
absolute gem of a human being. He was a professional skateboarder, and he worked
nice.
on Jackass movies and
Wow.
uh, Viva La Bam on the MTV, and all these like crazy things. And he got sober 7 or 8 years ago, and man, just what an honor it is to know him and be friends with him. And we got to do a nice long interview, and it ended in his new treatment center that he opened up in Wilmington, Delaware. And
Okay.
I'm super excited for everybody to see this one. I mean, it's amazing. His story is really similar to mine, other than, he was at the VMAs and did a whole lot cooler stuff than I did back in the day. But he opened recovery houses, and he has the same heart and the same spirit in those that I felt in the ones that I ran back in the day. And I'm so
Mm,
hopeful for his treatment center redemption to be able to do the same stuff Blueprints has done for their community. And
awesome.
the second one was Spike Cohen, who is our 2020 Libertarian vice presidential candidate, and who has just a shocking recovery story. It's a lot
Mm,
different than mine. It's a lot different than Brandon's. Really similar to yours, Joel. So you might
okay.
love Mike's story,
Yeah.
but
Cool.
compelling. The third one was a guy named Mike Mizwinski, who's a Nashville recording artist and just
Okay.
a virtuoso, but also a beast in recovery. One of the first
Let's go.
people I met when I came here in 2007, and he is still out there helping people and playing tremendous music. And then the fourth one is Paul Fletcher, a former Philadelphia Phillies pitcher, who's just a monster in recovery. One of the biggest hearted guys I have ever met, who will travel all over the place to do whatever he can to help anybody get into this. And man, I'm
Mm,
just so excited to be able to have other people watch that too, and hopefully laugh at how goofy we are, and just
yeah.
have fun.
God, I love how you say that. Beasts in recovery. That's so dope. Just a freaking beast, man. Put their heads down, do the work. Oh, that's so cool, man. And it's so cool that there are so many people in maybe your more mainstream world that are in recovery. I think it's and a lot of people don't talk about it. And I mean, you see like Steve-O, he talks about it. Russell Brand, those are some of those big guys that talk about it. So it's so cool that there's so many people out there that are in recovery and that they do value the sober life and that they have been able to create happy, healthy lives for themselves. I think we talked about this before the show a bit. The biggest fear is that most people think it's going to be super boring. Recovery is going to be just a pain in the ass, and like you said at the beginning, like you're just going to be being angry about your lawnmower in 39 years. And it's like, dude, these guys are prime examples, pun intended. You can get it on Amazon Prime, that you can live just a badass life and have amazing, cool experiences. So, man, guys, I definitely recommend checking that out. I may actually watch that tonight. TV is one of my addictions, so I have to be careful on how often I watch it. But maybe I'll just put on the background. I'm definitely gonna check it out though. Guys, I recommend you guys do it too, just to know that there's other people out there. Chris, this will not be the last you'll see of Chris. We're going to do some more shows together. We talked behind the scenes, and hopefully get some of these guys on to be able to share their experience with recovery as well. I know for me, when I didn't have very many friends and I wasn't cool in school, Friday Night SmackDown. That's what I look forward to, just to watch Batista just beat the shit out of some guys. And there's this Asian dude named Jimmy Wang Yang who was hilarious. He only lasted like a season, but he got me going because he was this like Asian dude that could flip and stuff. And so I do like WWE. And it actually, how naive I was, it took a while to realize that there's planning involved. Let's just say. So I literally believed it was real. I'm not gonna lie. I thought it was.
Right. But
I mean, it is real. It is real, and it isn't. It's like it's like, but those guys get messed up. Like they like break bones and
yes,
stuff.
I like to liken it to athletic theater.
Ooh, mm,
It's athletic theater,
mm,
because
mm.
you suspend your disbelief for 2 or 3 hours. Like if you look up the YouTube channel Three Legacies Wrestling,
Three
that's our
legs wrestling.
local Lancaster, really recovery-based wrestling promotion. Because
Okay.
Jesus, who you'll see on this show hopefully soon, Jesus came here to get sober, in Lancaster, and he
Mm.
realized in all the places he'd been all across the world, he'd never had his own promotion. He'd done it in India for other people, Egypt for other people, Australia for other people. Never had his
Wow.
own thing. We
Okay.
were able to help him do that. And if you watch some of the stuff on that YouTube, I mean, it's really the first year of its existence, but
Mm,
the crowds have grown, the community has grown. We've moved into
mm.
food drives and clothing drives and toy drives and really just doing everything we can to spread recovery and spread positivity in every way possible.
Oh, let's go, brother. Very cool. Very cool. So last thing I have a question for you as we wrap up, and this is for the audience a little bit. You know what? And I'm gonna be honest, it's a little selfish ask as well. If you're going through a rough time and you're sober and you think you should be living a great this badass life and life's just not going great, what is your suggestion for people in that situation, and or what have you done when your life hasn't been going as well as you like in recovery?
Man, every single time I believe or perceive my life to not be going the way it should, I'm wrong. I'm 100% wrong.
Oh,
Because
Chris.
every single time I think I need to be somewhere, or I think I should be doing something differently or better or whatever it might be, it's delusion. It is pure delusion. The universe, whatever you want to call it, always puts me in the position I'm supposed to be in, good or bad. And
Wow.
as long as I understand that and remain aware of opportunities, some of the greatest things in the world can happen. If we look back at
Mm,
every point in my life from the second we started talking on this podcast on, none of the good things that happened to me were by my design. None of them.
there it is,
Literally none of them. They were just the result of me going with the flow of the universe. And in the old days, when we were talking about me going to jail and going to treatment, I opposed the flow of the universe
man.
in every way that I could because I thought
Yeah.
I knew better and I needed to direct things. As
Hmm.
soon as I stopped directing things and going with the flow, everything got better. Even when things are going wrong, I try and
Hmm.
remind myself of the fact that I'm not in control. I'm
Wow.
going with the flow. And when I go with that flow, when I see what I can bring to people around me on that flow, my life gets better and better and better. So if you're struggling, jump on the old Instagram, jump on the Facebook, jump on the whatever. Reach out to me, reach out to Joel,
Mhm.
reach out to literally anybody and talk about it. Because when you bring somebody else into the situation, it really brings a ton of clarity. Because I can't see situations I'm in clearly. It's really difficult because I'm living them. But when I reach out to somebody else who has an objective perspective on what's going on with me, they can give me quality advice and lead me to my own conclusions as to what I should be doing. So I always advise having a strong support group, people who love you, people who care about you. And it doesn't even have to be somebody close to you. It doesn't even have to be somebody who lives near you. It could be somebody from far away. My friend Brandon helped
Mhm.
my friend Kurt get sober. They had never met. Never. We just saw some videos and it guided him towards recovery.
Mm,
And you never know how you're going to impact somebody else. And you never know how somebody else is going to impact you. So just
mhm.
remain aware and definitely know that whatever's up here is delusion. Go with the flow. And that's just how I live.
Wow, Chris, beautiful man. That grounded me like no other. And you mentioned that before, right? It's not in life's. It's not in. It's in life is in life's timing, and
Yeah.
it's just a good reminder.
Not my
Like
time.
I'm somebody that I'm an action person. I take it you are too. You want to get stuff done. You want to give your best in every situation. So when you do that and the outcome isn't great, or as you would have wanted, it sounds like it is always great. It's just not maybe what we wanted. That it can hurt
Right.
and it can be like, wow, what did I do wrong, man? What I thought universe was on my side, but I love not but so I'm really working on getting butts out of my vocabulary because what a butt says is that everything I said before was bullshit. So
Yep.
yeah. So and like just like you said, I'm always where I need to be because and every lesson is a lesson that was given to me as a gift to learn from. I'll just share with you right now. I just got a little mini relationship and I really like the person and I ignored all the red flags. And they are someone that is not in recovery or cares about sobriety. And it really kind of for me, it like like my college, my party boy self that's still in there got to like experience what it would have been like, you know, to date someone had I been healthier when I was using drugs and alcohol. So getting this experience, I got really, really attached. And just like you said with the support group, after like before getting into the relationship, I think 3 people said, don't do it. Don't do it. All people that are, you know, I trust. 2 of them were in recovery. 3 of them were. And then after about 6 people said, "Hey man, yeah, you should have been dating this person." And I'm like, why? And it's like, and I can see now it's because I needed to learn lessons on attachment involving women. I was adopted, so for me, I get really, especially in romantic things, it's, you know, I think it's a little different now, but up until this point, I would love to, like, my heart couldn't breathe. And there's actually a group for love addiction. If you guys didn't know that, you can search it in the PDF that you can download down below. It's going to give you, one of the support groups is for love addiction. It's a thing. It's just loving so much that you lose yourself, and that it becomes not about the other person. It's about it becomes selfish. It's like, okay, I want to love them so they can love me back and I can feel good and safe. And that's a lot of that did come up. So all this has been a huge blessing and lesson. And I just appreciate that reminder that this was higher powers design. This person came into my life to teach me these lessons. And all along, higher power knew that this person is not going to be a person that's going to be good for me long term. I mean, for God's sakes, I coach on addiction recovery, and this person uses exactly what I tell people not to. So like watching it's insane. Like, you know, you just like you said, you can't see what's sometimes 2 feet in front of you because it's 2 feet in front of you. So beautiful, man. And this is definitely going to go into a long form little video here so people can get that little nugget of info, because I think that's an absolute gem. So, you know, guys, we could talk for another 4 hours. I know we could. So I think easily, and we will be back. We got some more shows that we're going to plan to, you know, bring some more people on, and I you know, dive into a little more of our stories and their stories. So I first want to say, Chris, thank you so much for coming on, brother. This was amazing, and you're welcome. You're welcome, and appreciate you being of service and taking this time out of your day to share your story. And I know it's helped people already, and just to know that, like, I think again, I'll reiterate, what's so powerful about your story is you were at such a low. Like, it's not like, you know, you lost a girlfriend, or, you know, you lost a job. You know, you were in jail. You were in.
I lost plenty of those too. Don't worry.
And including that, right? Like, you used one. You lost many, and you know,
you got to remember, man. Like my low could have been way lower. You know, I know scores of people who had way worse stories than me. And the thread that binds us is that internal feeling, that thing that we have that other people don't, that mental blockade that about 10% of the population has. You know, that's the thread that binds us. Even though you may not have gone as far down the scale as I did, we still experience the same emotions, struggles, and they're as real to me in that moment as they are to you in your low moment. And so I don't like to put too much focus on how bad things got, other than to illustrate the fact that things can get that much better.
Exactly. That's exactly where I was going. To be like, yo, guys, so lesson today, compare your story with Chris. If it's not as good, you suck. No, it's really like, guys, if you can go that low, if you know people that can go that low, if I can go that low, you can go that high, right? And so absolutely, you know, that mental blockade, I mean, in this situation, you know, that feeling that life isn't right, that you're completely alone in this universe. Maybe it is just human. I don't really know. I fortunately cannot read other people's minds and see if the majority of people actually have that experience. But I know that, that there is a common thread that binds us, and that's that desire for pleasure and more, and the desire to be better and help other people and do all that good stuff. So, man, Thank you again, Chris, and thank you for everyone who watched and tuned in tonight. This was a very powerful episode, and it's an honor to have met you, and I'm really looking forward to continuing this relationship as we continue to, spread the message of recovery in whatever way we can. So, everyone who tuned in and comment, thank you guys so much. We will see you very soon. So look forward to more Chris coming up, and love it, man. Beautiful, guys. Check out Blueprints for Addiction Recovery as well. Like, it's a great. You can find more info on Instagram. You can find more info through Chris at his Instagram right there. And then for myself, if you do need some one-on-one support, I do have recovery one-on-one coaching, and I can help you through whatever tumultuous thing you're going through, and kind of like Chris said, get you a structured plan tailored to you, not to just it's basic, but it's going to be specific to what you're going through that can help you get sober. And I mean, we've seen it. We've seen people come out the other side, and it's really awesome. So for that, you guys can hit the link down below, book a call with me, and we can kind of find out where you are, what you're struggling with, what your goals are, and really start reframing that mindset. Because a big part of it, and what I focus on, is getting that mindset right, seeing that there's more to live for besides the drug addiction, and also working on some of those basic fundamental things that are going to help you feel better just naturally, like eating well, exercise, things that are going to give you natural highs that can kind of start to replace the high from the substance. It won't be as high, but if you can get maybe 4, 5, 10% a day, it's going to help counteract the withdrawal process. And then what I found, and I'm sure what you found too, Chris, is that once you get to a certain point, you're like, yeah, I've worked so hard to get here. It ain't worth going back. Like, I busted my ass to get to X amount of days. Like, I'll just screw it. I'm just gonna ride and die. So that was my kind of mindset. I just eventually said, I'm all in. We're all or nothing people, so might as well use it to something that's healthy. And other than that, yeah, check out the channel for more addiction recovery content. We got a show tonight with my good friend Joe. We're doing a Wednesday show, Chris. Where we talk about dating, and he has been in recovery for a couple years. He had like 11 years clean, and then he did slip back, but he's back on the horse, and he's what you would call like your typical masculine guy. So very, very, well built. He understands male female dynamics and relationships, and so he has a lot of great wisdom for guys out there learning how to be better with women, or if you're a woman, how to be better with men. You can take both sides of things you can learn from, and really start to have those healthy relationships, because no matter how sober you get or how much chemistry you have with the person, biology is going to kick in. And if you cannot satisfy some of those biological urges that we have as male and female, then unfortunately we see it a lot. The relationships just don't work out. So we're really focusing on helping guys get better in their dating life. And that's a huge part of recovery too. Like, I didn't get sober just to, again, sit on my butt and kind of watch TV. I got out there to have relationships, to meet people, to maybe one day have a family. And I knew that if I was to continue to use drugs, that was going to be not a possibility. So we're here to help you for that as well. And other than that, guys, once again, thank you so much. We'll see you in the next one, and have a great night. Adios.